So you want a powerful flagship phone with 3 cameras and don't want it to be a big hefty device you struggle to hold and carry around with you? Well, there are 2 obvious contenders here, the Samsung Galaxy S23 and the iPhone 15 Pro. The former of those is being replaced soon and means you can find it pretty cheap compared to its original retail price. The iPhone 15 Pro is not pretty cheap. In fact, it's quite expensive, so which should you buy? I'm Cam Bunton from Pocket-lint, and in this video I'm going to tell you. Now, part of the charm of these 2 phones is that they're both designed to be slim, lightweight and relatively compact. If this is the most important thing to you, however, the Samsung has you covered. It's slimmer and noticeably lighter than the iPhone, but as we know, there's more to design than just how small and easy something is to carry around. Durability matters too, especially with so many of us keeping our phones for longer than we used to. In this regard, the iPhone is far more capable of withstanding knocks and scrapes. Over the past couple of years of the ceramic shield being used on the iPhones, I found it to be incredibly scratch resistant to the point where I don't bother with screen protectors anymore. It's also strong enough that my iPhone 14 Pro, the previous model, took a tumble on concrete and the glass on the front didn't even crack. I can't say the same for the Gorilla Glass Victus 2 on the Samsung. It seems to mark up fairly easily, and after just a few days using the S23, the glass on the back showed signs of denting and marking too. As for water resistance, both are IP68 rated, and that means they can be submerged in water for up to 30 minutes. What's interesting, however, is Apple has rated its phone as deep as 6 meters for up to half an hour. Samsung rated its phone down to 1.5 meters. And what that means in reality is that if you accidentally drop either in the sink or get caught in the rain, they'll be fine. However, if you take them underwater on purpose to take photos or whatever else, it's the iPhone that might just do better. Now let's talk displays just briefly, because there are a lot of similarities here. Both are 6.1 inches and both can reach up to 120Hz refresh rates, and both are bright enough and dynamic enough to support HDR content. Putting them side by side, there's one thing that hits immediately, and that's Samsung's approach to color saturation. In its default vivid mode, all colors in pretty much any video are pushed quite far into the realm of oversaturation. Reds are more reds, greens are more green, blues are more blues. In fact, it's a classic Samsung thing. You'll see it in the camera comparison too. Where Samsung differs is that it lets you customize the look of the display and the color balance to suit your own preference, and you can switch off this vivid mode if you like and make it more natural and muted. With Apple, it's very much a case of you get what you're given, and even though what you're given is pretty fantastic, tinkerers might prefer the Samsung approach. I did find the extra brightness of the iPhone useful, particularly when using the cameras outdoors in bright daylight, but there wasn't much in this, and similarly, sticking Netflix on, watching them side by side, I couldn't really pick a winner. They're both great displays with great contrast levels and color. Software features do differ, however, and there are 1 or 2 things that I find really useful on the iPhone just for the sake of convenience. One of those is Face ID, the depth sensing facial recognition that works automatically whenever I pick my phone up. It's not only convenient and fast, it's secure. The fingerprint sensor on the Samsung works well most of the time, but I get more failed reads with that than I do with the Face ID. There's always the odd time where I place my thumb in not quite the right place. I also really like standby mode on the iPhone, which uses the always on display to show up this clock interface, turning the phone into a mini Echo Show of sorts. At nighttime it turns into a bedside clock. It's not a vital feature, but it is nice to have. If your main focus in getting a phone is having a device that's fast and buttery smooth, it's impossible to look past the flagship iPhone offering. Everything it does is effortless, whether it's launching demanding games and apps or just scrolling about in the interface. The high-performance custom chipset inside, combined with the fluid iOS software and 120Hz refresh rates, means it's consistently responsive all the time. What I've long noticed with Samsung, likely thanks to its One UI skin on top of Android, is there are times when it sometimes struggles to kick into gear. Like that first bit of motion when the screen has been static for a while. Whether that's swiping to go back to the home screen or swiping up on the app drawer, there's sometimes a tiny delay or stutter, making it feel ever so slightly less responsive than it should be. It's not that it's not capable of high-end performance, it's got 120Hz refresh rates too, and the powerful Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, but there's something about Samsung's software and launcher that sometimes makes it feel a tiniest bit sluggish every now and then. But apart from those moments, it's very fast, responsive, and up there with some of the best Android phones around for performance. As with so many portable electronic devices, the battery life you get from both phones will very much depend on how you use them. I'm a fairly light to moderate user, so even with these 2 smaller devices, I don't really struggle to get through a full day. Apple doesn't ever officially share its battery capacity, but the iPhone has always historically featured lower capacity batteries than its Android counterparts, purely because iOS as an operating system is less battery hungry. That means I found the battery life was similar on both. With my usual 2 to 3 hours of social media, casual gaming, messaging and web browsing, I finished the day with a good 30% or more left over. For display heavy tasks like gaming and video, I found the iPhone would drain a little slower, but not by much. In truth, given how similar they are, battery life isn't a factor to base your decision on. Now, what's interesting in the camera department is that although the hardware is similar in that they both have triple camera systems with ultra-wide, primary and zoom lenses, the processing of detail and colour is quite different on the two phones, as I alluded to earlier. It's worth saying here both can take great shots, and in daylight in particular they're strong performers across all three lenses. What I found with the photos was that Samsung, as is typical, produces pictures with really saturated colours. Reds, greens and blues are cranked up a little bit too much. And so the red bricks and paint in these shots just border too much on the hyper-real, as does the green on the roof. The iPhone also seems to do a better job of retaining detail in the shadows and bright highlights in the clouds, and gives everything a slightly more golden, natural light. Samsung often makes white balance cooler, just a tad too cool I think, stripping out that sense of natural light so that white areas in the image almost look completely pure white. It was similar when taking sunset photos in lower light conditions with lots of snow on the ground. Samsung in these photos cranks up the exposure a bit too much by default and then kills the colour in these pictures, producing more noise in the sky. The dynamic range on the iPhone shots was much better, as was the processing of colour and the noise levels. At least it was until I switched to the zoom lenses, where the iPhone, just like the Samsung, produced more grain and noise in the skies, particularly around the edges in these low light shots. In some ways this was to be expected, but in night mode there was a clear winner, if only because Samsung's phone seemed incapable of replicating the detail in the tree branches, producing this weird oil painting like effect. And it seems to do this a lot, and not just in night mode, and not just in the zoom camera. It's just it tends not to do it as much in the daytime, unless you're pushing the zoom further towards its outer limits. At night it's almost like it has approximations of what the detail is and just guesses, rather than delivering the authentic twigs, leaves and shadows and branches that you'd hope to see. Now the iPhone isn't perfect here either, but it's not as bad. So which should you buy? Well, here's the thing. To me, the iPhone is absolutely the best phone of the two, especially in the camera and performance department. If they cost the same amount of money, I would say buy the iPhone without hesitation. But now that the S23 is soon to be replaced by the S24 and it's been out nearly a year, it's considerably cheaper, to the point where it's priced more like an upper-end mid-range phone. And because it's still a very capable device that will save you a good wedge of cash, that's the one that makes sense for the most people. So I would get that one. Now if money is no object and you just want the best all-round experience, get the iPhone. Let me know what you think of these two phones in the comments down below. Would you get Samsung or iPhone? I've been Cam. I'm at Cam Bunton on social media. Please do leave a thumbs up if you did like this video, and subscribe to make sure you don't miss any more. And I'll see you again in the next one. Bye for now.